can you talk a little bit about, I'm fascinated. One of the reasons why I wanted to have a conversation with you is because I came here to the United States as a small child. By accident of birth, I got into the United States, and I'm trying to think of what is this idea of where we got our borders and what we're talking about. How did you get involved in the sanctuary movement? Can you?
Yes, it's a big question, obviously.
I know. Take any piece of it. Take any piece of it and bring it up, because this is an important issue that I want to talk about and explore some.
Okay, well, I would say it was somewhat, obviously stepping stones.
Yeah.
But I retired from teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And
what did you teach?
Most of my career, I taught high school journalism.
Yes.
But the last 7 years, I specialized in English as a second language. So I got to see what it was like for people to be learning a language. And if you backtrack, I guess about 8 years before that, I had taken a leave of absence from teaching and lived in Ecuador, mm-hmm. and to learn Spanish. And I learned so much more than Spanish, even though I'm still learning Spanish. I can't say I learned that, but to learn about different cultures and people. And so these are some of the stepping stones. Then when I retired from teaching, I had some books that the school was going to throw away, and I couldn't let that happen. And I looked around and I found a small little church here in Austin, San Jose Catholic Church, who was starting up, who had a program that they were teaching people English. And so I took the books over there and then ended up helping them start an ESL program. So I went from teaching middle schoolers English as a second language to adults. And it was so amazing to get to know the families, because many of these adults had been here a while. They had to wait till their oldest children were old enough to babysit the younger ones. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the course, to have these children come and how proud they were of their parents for studying English. That really started grabbing my heart, and I got more involved in the immigrant community here. One of the things I started doing was visiting. I was a part of the Tardan visitation program.
What is that?
Tardan is a for-profit prison in Taylor, Texas, that is an all-women facility. There are, I want to say about 530 women there. And so I got to know women, visiting them. We would go in as a visitor, but we also document the visits, and it's kind of like we're seeing what's going on in the prisons.
Yes.
And so I heard amazing stories of courage and a need for them to escape violence in their own countries. And they come to our border. They're put in the hieleras, the ice boxes, for anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks. And then they pass a credible fear exam and think, oh, great. We take them to these for-profit prisons where our taxes spend about $150 a day per adult incarcerated. I don't really spend that much money a day myself living. Yeah. So it would be a strange mix of, I would meet these women, get to know some of them, because I would visit them at least once a month, sometimes every 2 weeks. And sometimes they would be released and be on the road to have their political asylum, and other times they would be deported. When they were deported, I got more involved in the Austin community, meeting undocumented folks who have lived here for years. Of course, we give them the keys to our homes, to come and clean our houses, to nanny our children, to tend to our yards, and they're not a security risk. They're loving, wonderful people.
Yes.
So anyway, through that involvement, I started bringing some immigrant groups into my church, First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin. And so we got to know people, and then a friend of mine brought an immigrant woman who had already been incarcerated. She'd been at Tardan, but since she had friends here, they had to scoop her off and take her to Eloy, a different prison in Arizona, because they take them away from any connection if they can. And long story short, she eventually paid a $15,000 bond to get out. She represented herself, and then this attorney failed to file paperwork. She was doing her ICE check-ins, doing exactly what she needed to do. They failed to file some paperwork, and if she had been deported to her home country, Guatemala, she had been an LGBTQ activist in Guatemala, and we felt sure she'd be murdered.
Sure.
Actually, the cool thing, I was out of town when my friend brought her to the church. He'd called, and I was about to be flying off to see my sister-in-law to Brazil, and but he went on and brought her to the church. They visited with the minister. The minister talked to the board, and that was the beginning in 2015 of the new revised sanctuary movement in Austin. We didn't know what we were doing, but we jumped in. Zulma Franco is the woman I'm talking about, and she was a leader herself. At first, we tried to tell her what to do, but then we learned, wait a minute, sit back and listen to this activist.
Yeah.
And other groups got involved with us. And in 2.5 months, we did petitions, we did telephone calls, and within 2.5 months, our senior minister, Meg Barnhouse, had made a deal with an ICE agent, and they said that she could come in and she would get what's called prosecutorial discretion. At that time, it was a stay of removal. Mm-hmm. She got it for 1 year, and they renewed it after another year. It took Zulma a good 1.5 years to get her eventual legal status. So she does now have a resident card, and we didn't know what had hit us, you know. I mean, having her come in, it started off, people were bringing her meals, but everybody wanted to sit and visit her when they brought a meal, and you know, she had already gone through so much. She really didn't always want visitors, and another silly thing, I mean, she had her own food truck. She's a great cook. So that's where after a month or so, we learned to instead bring groceries to her, and people started voluntarily bringing groceries. So we really got to know Zulma. We went to the ICE office, and it was everything. When we take somebody in sanctuary, I should tell you, the first thing we do, well, they get settled for a couple of days, but then we do a press conference.
Right.
Because we want everybody to know what's going on. They reach out to ICE and tell them where they are and what they're doing. And but still, like I say, it was a whirlwind. 2.5 months later, she's free, we're all excited, and then we were just kind of breathing. Well, while Zulma had been in sanctuary at our church, there was another woman that was released from a family detention center, another Guatemalan woman, an indigenous Guatemalan woman, and her son. Mm-hmm. This is Hilda Ramirez and her son Ivan. And she had come because we had a Hutto visitation potluck at the church, because we would try to do things for Zulma while she was there. So she had some entertainment, some, could meet people, tell her story, build support. And so basically, Hilda had come one night and met Zulma. And she'd come to our church a couple of times. Well, and I didn't tell you, she had lived in the family detention center for 11 months with her son. She had been a part of a hunger strike. And conveniently, right before there was going to be a congressional visit, they let 6 different women out of that family detention center. But Hilda left with an ankle monitor, another part of the for-profit business, mm-hmm. and came and lived at a place here in Austin. And in about December of that year, that 2015, Obama started doing raids. And he said that they were going to be picking up anyone with deportation orders. Well, Hilda was watching the news, and she had a deportation order, but her son did not. His case was still pending, and she was scared. So the first thing she said is, I'll just go live in your church. She told another friend of mine from the church, and when this friend called me, and I'm like, whoa, I think we're still trying to figure out what we did. But there was another church in town, St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church. And so it's like, I think y'all should go visit St. Andrew's. And so they did that, and that's where Hilda and Yvonne ended up. Mm-hmm. And her case was harder. It took about 8 months for her to get, she didn't get a stay of removal. It was still the prosecutorial discretion, but they called it a deferred action. And so she and her son had a year deferred action. Well, fast forward through that year, and new administration, political climate is horrible. Yep. And they, without any explanation, just did not renew her prosecutorial discretion. So back up a little, another man, an El Salvadorian man, Aledio Gomez, had also taken sanctuary again at our church. We were ready again by this point. And so here we were starting his case, I guess, in August of 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And Ilda, about 2 or 3, I think in October of that same year, Ilda and her son went back into sanctuary without having their freedom. So our network, it's grown to about 30 congregations and social justice nonprofits. And our main tactic is this physical sanctuary. And so we meet and we run campaigns. We've done lots of petitions and telephone calls. We're really trying to move congressional representatives to step up and use their power to push ICE.
Yes.
Because they're the ones who employ ICE. And but it's been very hard. But with the new look of Congress, it's looking like we have more interest. And we're expecting, there are about 33 people, I think, across the country living in sanctuary, taking sanctuary in churches. And of course, sanctuary itself goes back to Hebrew times.
Absolutely.
And so it's been a safe place. It's just a tradition that ICE doesn't go into churches.
Mm-hmm.
They don't go into churches, schools, or hospitals. And so anyway, that's a bit of a nutshell there of what I've been doing. Does that answer your question about sanctuary?
Well, it does. It does in that sense. But when you're, what are you learning about yourself, Peggy, in this process? How are you growing in what you want to do? Because you retired like a NASCAR. You go in, you get 4 more tires, and you get back out on the road. And so that's what on the track. And so that's what you're doing. So what is this teaching you about you?
Well, the first couple of years of my retirement, I called myself a recovering teacher.
Yeah.
And but that was when I started teaching at San Jose, so it was just light.
Mm-hmm.
And so with getting more and more involved, one of the things I guess it's teaching me about myself, I used to say that the schools suck the blood out of teachers,
mm-hmm.
but I have to admit it's my personality. I throw myself into things.
Sure.
And I have a lot of passion, and I care about people. I mean, it's this basic tenet, whether somebody's religious or not, to love our neighbors.
Right.
I see the interdependent web that we all are a part of. And now I will say, well, I mentioned living in Ecuador, so I started learning Spanish late in life.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it's teaching me, well, it's because Spanish is harder for me, it makes me really pay attention more and try to listen to others. Because in English, I'm headstrong and I'm this extrovert, that's learning to back off and acknowledge the introvert side of life. But so I guess, that's something it's teaching me is to listen and that people, particularly, the typical thing, people think immigrants are coming here to get a good job. They're coming to take our jobs.
Right.
But they're not coming to take anything. They're escaping some of the violence that's happened in their countries as a result of our failed U.S. economic systems,
mm-hmm.
our failed military systems. That's the thing that happens is people don't realize what we've done to Central America, to Mexico.
Right.
And other countries. Any third world country, it's a place to go in and make money off of. And so, I'm supposed to be talking about what I'm learning about myself.
But still, that's the interesting part about it, is because what really resonates with me about this. One of the things that when in the Beto O'Rourke campaign, one of the things that he talked about was, why are we not convening a Latin American council that can begin to address some of the reasons why? I don't think people want to leave. I mean, I know, like in the Syrians, they would love to be able to stay in Aleppo and stay in their country and to be part of the same way here. If there were ways to address the systemic corruption, we would have an opportunity to be able to, I think the people would love to stay where they are and to be part of that culture. Don't you feel that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They would much rather be in their homeland. And we would like to be visiting their homeland.
Exactly.
They're so colorful. I mean, everything about their life. They care about nature. They have a good time. They laugh.
I find this fascinating because people will say to me, well, you don't look like a Mexican. And I go, okay, you have to understand, I was born in Mexico City, and in Mexico City we go from the blackest of black to the whitest of white, and there are Japanese Mexicans, and there are Swiss Mexicans, and French. I happen to be French, but that's just all part of it, because it's amalgamation. It's a great blended culture. But the brown skin we're talking about is that we're talking about the Indian, the indigenous population. This is much more of what the issue is about what our own white fragility, as we were talking about it, comes from as the part of that. And that's where I think that we got an opportunity to talk deeper.
Well, and that's exactly right. I mean, our immigration system is racist to the core. And that's another thing that's kind of disturbing to me, and something else I've learned is it took me, because I wanted to learn Spanish, to instead learn about a different culture.
Yeah.
And learn more about what's going on with immigration. And I was 10, 12, 13, 14 when things were happening in our own country with the civil rights, and with the voting rights, and with what was going on, how blacks were being mistreated.
Yep.
And I realized I was pretty sheltered from that. And so that's another thing. There's a new term called crimmigration.
Crimmigration.
Yes, because partly we're criminalizing immigrants.
Yes.
And we've already criminalized our African American population here.
Yep.
And so I started, so that's the other bizarre thing, that people are like, they weren't born here. Well, wait a minute. And now I have these formerly incarcerated friends who are some of the kindest, most intelligent, they've had a horrible day in their life in the past, and they've learned from it.
Yep.
But we caged them. And I don't see that as hyperbole. I mean, that is what our incarceration system does.
Yeah.
And so anyway, to see that overlap, that what we're doing, we were, I remember growing up and learning about lowering the recidivism rate.
Mm-hmm.
And now, letting people make money, putting profit over people. I already gave you the $150 a day cost for adults in prison, but in the family prisons, each parent and child, it's $300 each a day. We could do something more with them with that kind of money, and that all comes from Congress. They have I think it's a 34,000 bed quota, and then ICE goes and colludes with these private companies.
Yeah.
And here in Texas, our legislature is going to get back in session soon, and they were really trying to give those for-profit family prisons child care licenses.
Yeah.
And you should have heard them talk about it. They talked about it as if it was a resort. Those of us who knew better, who've been inside these prisons, were like, I guess we need to take our children and go see if we can get a room at the prison.
Exactly.
They call them detention centers and residential centers.
Sure.
But they have barbed wire on the top, and these children go through bed checks every night.
And they're not allowed to touch or have human contact in that way. It's a strange. I'm trying to imagine the board of a publicly held corporation that does detention. I'm trying to imagine what that board meeting would sound like. How that would be as they would stand and talk. Well, if it wasn't for us, maybe we do what because it's just something that hurts my heart. There's certain things that I'm just not sure that it's wise to put into the for-profit sector, and I don't think human detention is one of them.
Mm-mm. Absolutely not.
Because we should take a responsibility for all of us. If we're going to detain a human being, then we should all pay for it and not put it into the private sector. Make sure that we have some kind of accountability and not put in that extra layer in.
Well, and accountability does not have to involve cages.
No.
Now, somebody seriously mentally ill may need some extra help, but it should be a helping thing, not to put them away and
Right.
lock them up and call them bad forever. I mean, then when they get out of prison, when they serve their time, nobody wants to give them a place to live.
Right.
No one wants to give them a job.
Little box to make sure that you check when you're checking all the time. So what does redemption look like? I mean, we know that we're talking about the Me Too movement now, and so we're getting an opportunity to say, okay, with men, what does redemption for some of these people that worked at, well, let's see, what does it look like in the prison sector? What does redemption look like? How do we do that? How do we offer them an opportunity to return to the ballot box and to return to being a voter and return to being how do we show that we grow?
Well, allow some accountability, and most people are willing to take accountability for their actions and what they've done.
Yep.
And it needs to come from within. I mean, everybody does it differently.
Yeah. Well, that's where I'm learning. I mean, I turned 70 this year, and being able to feel that this time in my life, since I've been fortunate enough to not only be able to have all the white male privileges that I have experienced, but I've gotten. I mean, you know, I think about that. When I was growing up, Peggy, there was never a concern about where the meals came from. I had a World Book Encyclopedia. I had people spoke correct English around the dinner table. I mean, imagine. I mean, that is an extraordinary. That's an extraordinary. We went on vacations. I was able to. So all of those things were just part and baked into my experience. And for me, it's really important to me that I not take that for granted.
Right. Well, you know, I have to say something when you talk about spoke correct English too, because consequently, one of those implicit ideas that we learn is everyone should become the same. But that's really not, is that what we really want? And stop different dialects. Mm-hmm. Those people, why do they talk like that?
Yeah.
And why do they want to wear those colorful clothes that they're bringing from their other countries? They should just go home. It's like... No.
I was thinking about that, and because I was thinking about what can the Latino influence come in, and I feel like that the United States is very beige. Beige in many ways. Our culture is beige, and when I see the influence of the Mexicano, and I see this wonderful, I see the colors, and I see the vibrancy, I say, well, that's something that we can bring, and that's where I think that the influence can come and get us out of our ways of believing that we're just that we have to have this homogeneity in our. Because we're not.
Right. I mean, come on. Everybody has breakfast tacos every day in town, right? I mean, we've taken on their food. We love their food. And,
exactly.
They've brought other cultures have mixed different types of tacos. I mean, different foods and
that's where I think that's where we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity. I look out at a field. And one of the things that I was taught in biology when I first studied a little bit of biology, that if you have a monoculture in a field, that it will deplete the soil. What makes it vibrant is to have the different plants in there, because different plants will give different nutrients to the soil, will return, they'll help to pollinate one another, there'll be insects, there'll be all kinds of diversity. That this is the value of diversity. Mm-hmm. So I take that as a metaphor for us. That there is value beyond what I understand in a diverse culture. I mean, you experienced that from when you went down to South America and right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I started in Quito, a big city, but then I moved to a smaller town.
This is in Ecuador?
This was in Ecuador, a town in Tungurahua, the Baños de Agua Santa. Mm-hmm. And of course, $3 a day, I could go and have 4 hours of one-on-one Spanish classes. And I had about a 10-minute walk from the little hotel where I was staying to my school. But I learned very quickly I needed to give myself 45 minutes or an hour. Because when I walked down the street and I ran into somebody who I might have met, and they asked, "¿Cómo estás? How are you?" They meant it. You had to stop.
Wasn't just
I had to. I mean, it was a pleasure. But yeah, for an American, you know, it's like, hey, oh yeah, I got to go. And I'm back here, and I'm that way. And I try to slow down for my grandchildren. I'm like, hurry up, hurry, got to go, got to do this, got to do that. But they take the time to really talk about life and how things are, and the foods, and just everything about their life.
We have artificially sped up our lives. I mean, the times that we have are, it's an extraordinary time now. I have to bring attention to it so that I do slow down. So how do you slow down? How do you keep in that focus?
I can't say that I keep in that focus, but I definitely try. How do I slow down? I mean, I'm really working on it, taking a breath, not saying the first thing that comes to mind. But I'm just so used to being quick that, and I guess when I'm around people and I do slow down and I hear them, and it's like, oh yeah, it's a good thing I didn't say anything, because I can learn so much more from them, and everything needs, everything goes both ways.
It's such that's the thing that I want to be a learner and continue to be more of a learner and to ask a better question than to provide a better answer. It's so much deeper for me. So if I can converse with you and meet you at that level of one heart to another rather than one judger to another, but it requires me to constantly to stay in that place and to stay in that focus.
Right.
So what's on your agenda? What's in your windshield for 2019, and what kinds of projects, plans are going on?
Well, I guess the biggest thing right now that we're working on with our Sanctuary Network is we are really trying to move individual congressional representatives to join us in this pursuit of prosecutorial discretion. Of course, everyone hears about, and we need comprehensive immigration reform. We want that.
Yep.
I want them to stop the TPS, the temporary protective status.
Yeah.
They're talking about stopping it. I mean, they are banning it. It needs to stay here. These people have been here for years. They've married. They've had children here. And suddenly we're going to send them back to their countries that are somewhat war-torn. DACA, of course, the DACA kids mean the rural, I mean, I shouldn't say kids because they're adults too.
Sure.
But recipients of DACA, that's very important. But there's another thing that needs to happen, because there are people that don't qualify for TPS.